This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Blue sky, smiling at me.
Hello, quiet rioters. This is Alex Andreou.
Bluebird.
It was in spring 2023 that I first received a direct message from a friend who was laterally associated with a tech firm telling me that, whisper it, this app called BlueSky was the new Twitter, and it was still only beta testing. Would I like a code? A few months later, and after some more prodding, I did establish a sturdy Alex account on BlueSky. I loved the feel of it. It was familiar but not samey, and felt like a cleaner, brighter space than Twitter, in the process at the time of rebranding to the hellscape that is X. But that was lacking was the engagement, the curated timeline, the news stories, the friends I'd gotten used to. It seemed like a load of hard work to rebuild my community from scratch. Basically, neither the pull factors nor the push factors were strong enough. But my impression having been very positive, as Musk spiraled into basically the world's richest shit poster with his own 4chan social medium, I decided to give BlueSky another chance. And the experience was a revelation for many reasons that I will go into. Now, I promised you a BlueSky special where I chat through this stuff. What I neglected to mention was that such is the extent to which this podcast has adopted the platform and the platform has adopted the podcast, that joining me to chat through it all, I have the Chief of Operations at BlueSky, all the way from San Francisco. Welcome to Quiet Riot, Rose Wang.
So happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Alex.
I was gobsmacked when you told me that you'd heard of us because you'd seen the sort of migration from the starter packs. That's so strange. Like, Rose, often with tech firms, one has no idea if you're dealing with a massive company or a sort of three-person outfit. So can I ask you, first of all, a little bit about how you ended up at BlueSky and what is the sort of size and structure and feel of it?
Absolutely. So I can go into details about my exciting stint as a CEO, founder of a food tech company for 6 years, or my experience leading customer experience at an AI company. But I'd rather tell you about how I met Jay, the CEO founder of BlueSky. So Jay and I lived in a 22-person community house in San Francisco over the pandemic. And over shared meals and late night jam nights, Jay helped me understand how current social media platforms are made up of a small group of people who make decisions about what billions of people can see, who can be there, who gets more status and love than others. And that's just a lot of power. And when Jay told me she was going to be the project lead of BlueSky, and at that time it was just a research project that was kicked off from Twitter, within Twitter, I was very supportive, but I didn't see a moment in the market that people wanted a new social media platform. And things changed very quickly when Twitter changed hands, because we saw overnight how a captain can sink the ship, that one person can make decisions that changes the entire platform, the governance, the culture. And so that is why BlueSky exists.
Yeah, I mean, that concentration of power could not have been made more clear.
That's right. And that's not how offline world works in terms of the democratic values that we espouse here in America and the UK. But yet on social media, what we're looking at is a small group of people who have a lot of power over what billions of people see. So how do we translate more pluralistic values where there's lots of people who can make decisions and users have much more choice that's reflective of what we live offline?
So that's how BlueSky was sort of born and its mission. Can I ask you, what is it like being a woman in such a sort of bro world?
That is a good question. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that Jay and I are two women running a social media company. That's rare, and we bring in our experiences as women, thinking through safety, through moderation. And so most early social media companies, moderation tends to be an afterthought after growth.
Mm.
And for BlueSky, we started out with moderation as a priority from day one. We think that you can't have the candy without the medicine, that you can't have fun without the safety. And so that is why I think having a very diverse set of team members reflects then in the product and affects the end user, because we're bringing that perspective in the build.
So this is my experience of moving over sort of more actively the second time. The difference between my legacy account, as it were, on Twitter, where I have, I don't know, 150,000 followers or something, and the brand new account, which is the account of the podcast, which we just started 14 weeks ago, incredibly, and we've just broken through 300,000 downloads, which is just insane.
Congrats.
And the difference is massive. So the legacy account is obviously nowhere near the reach that I have on Twitter. But the new account, the brand new Quiet Riot Pod account, already has about 50% more followers on BlueSky than it does on Twitter, and much, much more engagement. And all the engagement is really positive. Like, we are converting people into listeners, and, it is doing the job that social media is meant to do at its best. It's basically connecting people with something that they might find interesting. And I find that quite extraordinary, because I have grown a lot of accounts, not just mine. I have done corporate work for various nonprofit organizations. And the way you could grow an account 2 or 3 or 5 years ago compared to now, I mean, it just goes nowhere unless you pay money,
Yeah.
unless you pay a serious wad of cash to Musk. The algorithm keeps you invisible.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot tell you how many people on BlueSky whom I've followed and have been following me for years on Twitter, and with whom I interact very regularly, have been saying things like, "Oh my God, you have a new podcast." And it's like, I promote it like every 10 minutes. So how is it possible that you haven't seen this or don't know about it? The curtain of the algorithm at the moment is just iron. And one of the both positive but also alien things on BlueSky is that you don't have that algorithm making decisions so invasively for you. So you have to kind of go out and create your own timeline again. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love this story, because when social media first took off, many of the founders came to connect the world. That was the initial vision of social. What we've seen is, with pressures of advertising, actually advertisers being the end consumer or customer that we're serving, and not end users, the incentives have warped over time. And thus, we are experiencing on social media more media than we are social. And so that, essentially, I think the experience you're experiencing is what many people experience. What we've heard is, I don't see my friends in my timeline anymore, or in my feed anymore. It's mostly influencers. And even for the influencers and creators, they're just posting for the algorithm. There's no true connection or engagement with their audience, because they don't own that relationship with their audience. The platforms do. And so BlueSky looked at these fundamental wrong incentives of centralized social. And that's why we have a completely new system. And the new system, it looks really familiar. It's why people think we're a Twitter. It looks like Twitter on the surface, but it's like comparing TV in the 1950s to Netflix today.
Yeah.
On Twitter, you have a small group of people deciding what you can see in 2 feeds, much like the 3 TV channels that were available in the 1950s. Twitter's feed is a black box algorithm designed to keep you scrolling, and you have very little control over what happens and what goes into that feed, and you can't change it. On BlueSky, we've built the foundation for anyone to build a feed. So not just us. If you want to only see pictures of cats, there's about 4 or 5 feeds with just pictures. And you want a feed that updates you on what just your close friends are doing, what they've posted, and it just reaches the end and you can put down your phone. That feed exists. It's called quiet posters on BlueSky. You can just subscribe to different feeds, and you can subscribe even to different moderation labels that users are making themselves. So for example, many artists are worried about AI generated art.
Yeah.
A BlueSky user made an AI image labeler, and if you subscribe to his label, then you can choose to hide all AI generated art from view. And so this level of choice is democratic ideals in action. So by distributing the controls, allowing users to craft their own feeds and moderation labels, we're giving you the power to basically find your friends, find people, and create your own community. And what we realize is everyone's experience is unique and deserving of respect. And so when you have all these different communities, which is more reflective of a subreddit experience almost than a Twitter experience, that's why I think we're starting to see the healthiness of a community online where you actually care about the people you're interacting with, because there's more signal than just here's some person in my timeline.
And just to make it clear, I'm a political person. I'm not looking for some sort of meditative space where my views are never challenged. Although, actually, if you want that, there are feeds that will provide you with that.
Sure.
But what I'm not looking at is to be hit over the head all the time with the most hateful, the most incendiary, the most divisive content, which is what I find now is going on X. And the proof of the pudding, actually, for me, has been that now, after 2 weeks of doing this conscious migration, I now reach for the butterfly before the X. Just naturally, I am more interested in what people are saying and how they're responding to the latest episode or whatever on BlueSky than I am on Twitter, because I kind of know that on Twitter it will be maybe 10 people who are genuinely responding to the content, and then 75 blue ticks calling me a racialized slur or a homophobic slur or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm just not that into it. But the fundamental difference, and I would like you to take just 2 minutes to explain that a little bit to listeners who are not tech savvy necessarily. BlueSky is open source.
Yeah.
That is a really fundamental thing. Can you just say a few things about that?
Yeah. So, what does it mean to be open source? Very simply, every piece of code that we write is completely open to the public. So anyone can go on GitHub and literally copy and paste our code and build a BlueSky clone in the next hour. And that level of openness and transparency, I think, is fundamentally different than what we've seen with past platforms. And the reason why we are open source, the reason why we are, I think you might have heard the word decentralized, which I want to also demystify, which is basically, if you think about it today, and I mentioned before, right now on platforms like Twitter and Meta, it is one organization, small group of people who have central power and they make all the decisions. Our goal is to distribute power and decision making so that no single organization or entity has complete control of the platform. Users can create their own feeds. Community leaders can create their own moderation labels to fit the needs of their community. Creators can own their followers and take them to other platforms in the BlueSky ecosystem with one click. Developers will be able to build cool experiences because we're built on an open system, and we'll never say, hey, we're going to close down our APIs. And I don't know if you remember Zynga from Facebook that helped build Facebook over time. And overnight, it just got shut down because the APIs were closed. And that whole business of games that users loved got taken away because Facebook wanted to own that experience. And so that is what we espouse, is an open system that has contributions from the community. That's a part of how we build. And then we're listening to what our users want, and we're giving them the controls.
But is the physical infrastructure concentrated, or is it like Mastodon, which is using servers here, there, and everywhere, and basically people hook their bit onto the central app?
Yeah, great question. So there's lots of different ways to think about how to serve groups of people. So on Mastodon, the way that they see it is each community is defined by the server,
Yeah.
and that server has a specific set of moderation rules that only apply to people in that server. And they tend to be smaller groups of people, like a couple 100,000 at most. And that's one way to go about this, which is we have lots of small groups and we're going to let those small groups govern those spaces. But there's actually not so much of a global view of what's happening across all these different groups. The like counts take a long time to add up because you have to calculate it from every server and add it up.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of these complications in the tech that end up complicating the experience for the end user for some of these other protocols. The way that we think about it is, you know what, the end user should just have a Twitter-like experience or just should have a Reddit-like experience. They don't need to know all these complicated, you have to have a key and store the string of words somewhere. We took all of that away. Just sign on, get a username. That's all normal. If you care about these finer tuned controls, there's much more you can do with them. But what we've recognized is that for most users, what you really end up caring about is choice. That's what the technology has enabled.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry about how technically it works. What's most important for us, if you do care, it's open source, you can look it up. But if you don't care, and that's a majority of people, and you just want to know, hey, what are the ideals of this company and what do I get? Know that on BlueSky, all these tools for most companies like Meta, they have moderation tools, but only the team can control them. Here, what we're trying to do is give it to the user and say, you have more tools to control your experience. And so fundamentally, I think our principle is we're for the people, by the people. We're not the only people making feeds, moderation tooling. And that's what makes us so different from all the other protocols out there.
But there is an overall sort of community guidelines and feel to it. And I've been really impressed with how, I guess, actively it's pursued. I mean, there's no reason why that should impress me. And yet, this is the environment we are in, that you are used to sending off, the report of something truly horrible, more in hope than in expectation. And I've been impressed with how on the ball, actually, the moderation tools and teams on BlueSky have been.
Quiet, right.
Can we get a little bit into what the numbers are doing, especially in the UK? I hear a lot about a sort of Brexit from Twitter, and you have noticed it, right?
Yes.
So tell me, what is happening?
Yeah, absolutely. One note on moderation before we get into this, and I think that's part of the Brexit, is that people are finding that they're having a healthier, safer, more fun time on BlueSky. And one of the big reasons is we hired over Twitter's former head of election integrity. He ended up being the co-lead of trust and safety at Twitter, and now he's the head of trust and safety at BlueSky. And so we do have a community guidelines that we take very seriously, and we have a team of moderators that we have direct relationships with who review all moderation reports within 24 hours. We get back to folks. And so that is the baseline foundation of us keeping a safe space. And then on top, you can have all sorts of labels that you subscribe to. So that's, I think, why you're having a good time. In terms of what's going on in terms of Brexit and how many people have come over, that's been really fun for us to watch, which is basically the last, it's about the last 2 weeks. We've had about a couple 100,000 users from Twitter come over to BlueSky because of what we're learning. A lot of the misinformation potentially that is being
Yeah.
propagated on
Yeah.
Twitter.
And I mean, Elon Musk being actively provocative. He's literally trolling our prime minister every hour on the hour. It's a little bit like when Trump became obsessed with London Mayor Sadiq Khan, and we were like, how does he even know the mayor of London? And like, what is your issue, man? Um, and my question is this: are you bracing for a possible much bigger wave if Musk begins to involve himself even more actively and even more personally in the upcoming US election? Because you might see a bunch of progressives going, that's my red line.
We want everyone, progressives, conservatives, anybody who cares about safety, fairness, truth, to come onto Blue Sky,
Yeah,
and we are ready. And this was a big election year all over the world, not just in the U.S. and
true.
U.K. And so, part of the reason Aaron, who was the former head of election integrity at Twitter, came to Blue Sky is we are very much focused on the election season, making sure that we're geared up for misinformation and transparency. And so by building an open protocol, we've put focus on collaborations with fact checkers and AI technology to help identify and label unreliable information through our
Mm-hmm.
system of community annotators. So that's first and foremost is safety. And then on top of it, what we're excited about is the number of cool feeds that have popped up and all the tools that different newsrooms can build on top of our system to help you, whether that's polling or interesting data around where users are voting. These are all experiences that can be built on top of Blue Sky. And so we welcome new waves of people because in order to create this new world of social media where more than one entity, one organization makes decisions, we want users to also believe in that and help propagate this new.
But I guess what I'm asking is in terms of technical capability and staff hiring, you must at the moment be planning for scenario A, scenario B, scenario C, with quite a lot of flex in those, right?
Absolutely. I think as a startup, you have to always have lots of flex, but we are focused on, okay, if we hit this number of users, our infra is ready to go. We can take on 100 million users, no problem at this point. We have the staffing available. Our tools are extremely flexible. And so this is why I'm talking to you. We need to get the word out. We want people to know about Blue Sky. And I think once people experience how fun it is, I think that's the key is like we've been talking a lot about safety, but I think the reason why people are coming to Blue Sky and sticking is because it's
a relief.
It's a relief. And we got a lot of funny people like jokes. We got memers. We do have our own shit posters. The Purchase of the Onion, the satire publication, kicked off on Blue Sky, which tells me that gives you a sense of the type of cheekiness of the culture of Blue Sky.
And that's okay, I mean, that's absolutely fine. I think that's part of the fabric of what makes it fun.
Yes.
The problem is when it's pushed on you constantly ahead and instead of anything else that you might want to see. And also when it becomes automated, which it very much has now. It is so obvious on Twitter that people will be posting the same phrase, the same paragraph, millions of times. Can I ask you what are next steps just in the short term for the platform in terms of features? Like video capability is a big one, obviously. And I know that you've been trying to solve that. How's that going?
Great question. Let's just say that video is coming very soon.
Yay!
Yes.
Because that would be amazing. That would be like the last piece of the puzzle for me. Threading. Are you working to make that a little bit easier so that you don't have to go and look for your own thing and post a reply to it? And
absolutely. There's so much we're doing with video. We are working on different ways of replying, threading, like hiding certain toxic comments, maybe below the fold. There's all these experiments we're running. And then on top of it, we're also experimenting, you mentioned with starter packs.
Oh, they're great. They are a fantastic innovation. They've been really the game changer for us because, as I said, I don't want to have to rebuild everything from scratch. And actually, when you get 4 or 5 people that you trust going, I've put together, some familiar faces or some accounts that I like or some cat pictures or whatever. Actually, feeds is the one that I have to explain to people the most because it's so unfamiliar to have control of that. I think we have become so accustomed to being imposed upon by someone else that determines the feed. That's the bit that people really have to have explained to them. I guess the last bit of the puzzle for me is like when you achieve critical mass, how do you plan to turn the company profitable? Because I guess that is when the problems begin.
That is true if we choose the current advertising model that centralized or social platforms like Meta and Twitter use. And so one way that we've made it really hard for us to have that advertising model is that most data on BlueSky is public, like the web. And why is that important? Because advertising is the selling of data to advertisers. But if the data is public, then it's free, it's open.
Yeah.
And so not to say we can't have advertising, but it's not going to be the same business model that runs the entire business like these other platforms. And I think that's wonderful. And that's actually what is going to ask us as a company to look for better business models that serve our users, creators, and developers who are building the ecosystem that we're building. And so one thing that we always say is that money follows value. And so it's really important to see where users are finding value currently in the network and what we can then build upon that. And so what we're already seeing today is that users are paying each other on Patreon or Ko-fi as people are building feeds or building different experiences, that they're supporting each other that way. I think that's an opportunity for us to capture those payments internally. But our goal actually is to keep only a cut of those and then pass back those dollars to the feed creators, to the developers, to the creators who are these experiences. And so it's a much more democratic and I think aligned incentive structure for everyone to behave better because we're all in it together. And so those are the new models that we're excited about. And same with even advertising. Not all advertising is bad. We all buy things.
Well, I mean, of course not. Yeah. And it's possible that actually by allowing people to put together their own communities and their own feeds and stuff like that, what you might enable is a sort of hyper-targeted advertising that is of huge value to people who want to sell cat toys to the feed of cat pictures, which is something that people who like cat pictures would welcome. They wouldn't go, why are you showing me more cat pictures, right? How do we keep the momentum going, Rose? Starter packs are great. We're going to do another one. I thought we could try and organize maybe a screen grab day. Now, what do I mean by that?
Yeah.
The habit is for people to post stuff from other platforms into BlueSky. Here's what's going on. So what if we do one day a week where we post first and foremost and maybe exclusively to BlueSky and then feed those screen grabs into other media to say, hey, look what's going on here. Do you like that?
I love that.
Are you going to steal it? I encourage you to.
Well, if we steal it, we'll make sure to give you credit. Absolutely, yeah.
The only other bit of advice, I guess, I would want to give listeners who have recently come over, who are thinking of coming over, is there is an etiquette to the place. It is different. So step lightly because, like, for instance, because the algorithm is so impenetrable on Twitter, in my first 2-3 days on BlueSky, I was overposting. I was over reposting everything that was coming my way. And I was ending up sort of crowding people's feed because I'm used to an environment where, if I'm lucky, 1 in 20 posts will get through that algorithmic wall. And so I learned that it's a space where you post a little bit less frequently. You don't repost every single positive comment that you have. But at the same time, I would also say, don't let the old hands over police you.
Yeah.
It is your space too. There's a lot to learn. Listen respectfully, but ultimately you have to speak in your voice and curate your own feed. So, the fact that someone was there 6 months before you doesn't mean they own the space. So, what bit of advice would you give people thinking of coming over?
Yeah, I love your advice. And one thing I would say that's quite different about BlueSky is the culture you mentioned, is that it's much more authentic and chattier. And I think that's why it's fun for people, because there are fewer people, scammers or trying to self-promote, that actually doesn't do as well on BlueSky when it's obviously that.
Yeah.
It is truly a place of cheeky, fun scientists, journalists, writers, artists who really just want to engage and make friends. And so showing up authentically and just even replying, people are so friendly and you're going to make friends very quickly. And so my advice is, this is a new party. In this party, you can be yourself. And that's actually the best way to show up and make friends on BlueSky.
Rose Wang, thank you so much for your expertise and your warmth, which is not something easy for people in the tech world. Thank you for your time.
Oh, you too, Alex. Thank you so much for having me.
If you appreciate Quiet Riot as much as it appreciates you and you think the work we do is worth doing, you can now support us on Ko-Fi. That's ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot. You see, I don't say coffee because then I think people will go and type coffee.
I was going to say, I don't know how to pronounce this.
Well, I quite like Ko-Fi because then it makes you think that it's spelt somehow differently. So There you go. Anyway, I will drop links to our starter packs, including a brand new third one when this goes out, in the show notes. Keep quietly riotous. Love ya.
I never saw the sun shining so bright.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreou and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Nothing but blue skies from now on. You like that, Mama?
Quiet Riot.
So cute.